Welcome to On the Beat, where we bring you a different Buffalo Bills beat reporter every week, exclusively on the Overreaction Sports Network.
Well, what is going on, everybody? Welcome everybody into this episode of On the Beat, on the brought to you exclusively on the Overreaction Buffalo Sports Network, powered by the Believe Podcast Network. This is the show where we try to bring you a different Buffalo Bills beat reporter, maybe not every week in the offseason, but close enough. We try to take some breaks and give some people some breaks as well, so that we're not pulling on them all the time. But it is so good to have every single one of you guys joining with us. Again, apologies as well for being a little bit late. We were watching Prince shred in front of a bunch of rock gods as we were waiting. I had to show them the clip of My Guitar Gently Weeps, which if you have not seen that, any of you listening to me that can hear my voice, not right now, but after this, Google it. It's unbelievable. My name is Joe Miller. You can find me on Twitter at Joe Miller Wired. So good to have you alongside my co-host, former Buffalo Bill, John Fina, left tackle for the Buffalo Bills for 10 years. John Fina, franchise left tackle. Please do us a favor. Please please subscribe, whatever platform you're consuming this vidcast on. Hit that like button, smash it, as the young kids say. Hit the subscribe button. And same thing if you're listening in audio version, podcast form on every podcast platform. Please hit the like and subscribe button. But today we are excited to have back on the program one half of the Buffalo Shout podcast and Bills beat reporter for Syracuse.com, coming to us direct from Olean, New York, where I was born. Ladies and gentlemen, Ryan Talbot. Ryan, my man, how are you now that you've seen Prince completely annihilate a guitar in front of a bunch of what I would call rock gods?
My night is made now after seeing that, so I'm doing great. Thanks
the
for having me.
bar is low.
In Olean, yeah, it absolutely is.
Yeah, you got beef and barrel out there, bro.
That's true. That's very true.
And that is a staple that's been there for decades.
Hey, Ryan, we'd be in a meeting, offensive line meeting, and somebody would think they said something smart, and they, expectation is they'd be lauded a little bit, and like, yeah, you get a ham sandwich and 2 bus tickets to Olean.
Oh, jeez, that's amazing.
I still have a whole lot of family that live out in Olean and Allegheny and places like that. So, yeah, Ryan, super good to have you. I hope the offseason has been treating you well. Free agency, obviously, we're a couple weeks into free agency. We're about a month away from the start of the NFL draft. And about an hour ago, we got some news in the AFC East. Would you like to break that information for us?
Yeah, absolutely. Stefan Diggs, a familiar name and face for Bills fans, agreed to a 3-year deal worth up to $69 million. And, up to are those key words in that phrase, because he gets $26 million guaranteed over that. Realistically, I would not be surprised if this is just a 1-year deal where, if he has a great season, they could bring him back. But this could be a one and done type situation. I will still say kudos to Stefan Diggs and his agent coming off of the ACL injury. To be able to get that much guaranteed is a pretty impressive feat. Downside of his career, over 30 years old, serious injury for the first time in his career, and to still get that kind of money is impressive.
Yeah, I can't see a world where he's playing quality football before November? Right? I mean,
right.
We've seen it, and it's funny because I put stuff like this on Twitter. Like, we'll talk about just players in general that have an ACL injury, and every time I put it out there that it's at least a 12-month injury, and that's with the understanding that the player's never 100% healthy, even at 12 months. And everybody's like, "Oh, he'll be back early," and it's like, even if he's back in 10, he's not Stefan Diggs. Like, he's not the pre-injured version of Stefan Diggs. It just seems like a lot of it. The Patriots are doing what the Bills used to do during the 17-year drought. They're just throwing dartboards at people and giving them money. It's kind of nice to watch.
I agree. That's a hell of a lot of doubloons for a guy who, may or may not be ready by October. I think it's surprising. And I said earlier that in a show, the type of game that he plays, the type of routes that he runs, stress all those little ligaments a lot more. I mean, this is not a 4-3-40 guy that's just running 9 routes down the field. I mean, he makes his living by, shimmy, shake and ditch the guy and get, tiny little window. But, I'm not upset that the Patriots signed him, because I don't think we're going to. I don't think it'll bite us as Bills fans.
No, I'm not anticipating that either. And, Joe, you mentioned they're throwing out money like crazy. I think, Milton Williams, for instance, is a very good player. I don't know if he's a $26 million defensive tackle on average. Stefan Diggs, the amount of money they're giving him. It's going to be interesting. Obviously, different positions, but fresh in your mind should be Von Miller. And Von Miller rushing back from serious lower body injury, plays an entire season. I think he has 3 quarterback hits the entire year. No sacks. Then finally, this past season, he starts to flash a little bit more, but Diggs can be out there on the field. He's not going to be that same player, at least not this season.
I just don't see how he earns it. And, we can move on from that, but getting the money, receiving the money, and earning the money are 2 totally different things, whether it's a stat line or demanding coverage or what have you. But I'd be surprised that he actually earns that money.
Agreed.
Yeah, it's not to camp on the Patriots, but the money that they're spending. Drake May is a nice player. It remains to be seen. Every new quarterback that comes into the league is the next Josh Allen, and Drake May is the next Josh Allen as well. So we're told. But like even Joe Milton, it seems to me the business they should be like trying to conduct is finding a home for Joe Milton and getting as many draft picks for him. Or, I mean, God forbid you move on from Drake May, but Joe Milton in the game that he played against the Bills last game of the season looked incredibly good.
Yeah, 100%. He's someone that I think they're going to try to, I would think, audition in the preseason if they still have him on the roster. I know there's been a lot of speculation about what they're looking for if they were to move him now in terms of maybe a day 2 pick or something along those lines, which if they can get that, good for them. He showed a lot of talent. He showed the athleticism, able to move around a little bit. He's not a statue in the pocket, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot to like. It's just such a small sample size that you don't know. They're going against the Bills' backups in that game as well.
Yeah,
lack of overall game planning for that.
It's the Rob Johnson sample size, basically, right?
It's a tough one if you're a team looking for a QB.
Yeah, were you gonna say something, John?
Oh, I was just going to agree in a way that it was not just some backups on the field for us, but a little bit of low motivation, right? There are some games that are just hard to get up for, and if your place is locked in the playoffs and you're grinding and you're in week 17 or 18, you're like, oh, really? I got to go in. You're still going to get there, but you don't have the same energy. I don't care what anybody says.
Yeah, that's a game that Joey Bosa, who Brandon Beane obviously said, plays with reckless abandon, that if Joey Bosa was in that game, he'd be tiptoeing around piles trying just not to get hurt. Like, let's not get hurt in this stupid football game. Real quick, welcome to everybody in the comment section over here on YouTube. If you are watching us live on Twitter or on Facebook, jump over to YouTube. The comment section, the community there is much better. And I love what Levi says here. He says, I hope Mac and Diggs fist fight. Which that would be a fun conversation first day in the locker room, because Steph was here and was the man, then gets run out of town on a rail. Basically, Matt comes in, and I can't imagine, because we went through the entire arch of like, no, we love Steph. Steph is like my best friend. He's still a brother to me. Blah 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 blah. To at the end of it, Josh was just like, F it. Like I don't have to force the ball to anybody, and thank God he's gone. I can't imagine what those two are going to talk about.
Polar opposites, and for sure. And maybe that'll be a good thing for Stefan Diggs to have someone like Matt Collins in that locker room, who just a great overall person, great guy, kind of just goes with the flow. Could be good for him late in his career for sure.
Yeah, that's funny. So switching back over to the Buffalo Bills, I should say switching officially to the Buffalo Bills. I'm not going to keep you super long here on this off-season night, but the Buffalo Bills have made some moves, obviously, focusing on the defensive line. Joey Bosa, Hoyt on the defensive line, and then also
Ogunjobi.
Ogunjobi. I was going to say Ogun.
Yeah, I think he can. I think he tolerates being called Joby.
Yeah, Ogunjobi. It's in my brain. I was just trying to say a different name, which was not working. But with those two suspensions, where do you think that puts the Bills, just in the sense of, obviously they're going to have to do something to get some guys in to take the place of those of Hoyt and Ogunjobi? Does this open a door for Jordan Phillips possibly? And do you feel this is going to be a problem for the Bills, or is it just something they'll probably not have too much trouble with?
Yeah, I wouldn't say a problem, and also not something that they're just going to be able to skate by with either. I mean, 6 games is a large chunk of the season that you're going to
Yes.
be missing 2 players, and we know how much Sean McDermott loves his D-line rotation. So it's an opportunity for others to step up. It's a huge opportunity for a young kid like Javon Solomon to get some extra reps. It's going to be an opportunity potentially for a rookie that gets drafted in this draft class to get some live game action because you mentioned Bosa. They want to keep Bosa fresh throughout the season. And as soon as this Hoyt suspension was brought down and announced, I think the first thing a lot of people thought was, oh, that's going to lead to a spike in snaps for Bosa. And that's the last thing Buffalo wants in the first 6 weeks of the year with someone that's been banged up the last 3 years. So you want to limit his reps. So it's a huge opportunity off the edge. You have AJ Epinesa in the final year of his deal. They have some people there now, but I anticipate them adding another body there. And then defensive tackle, Ogunjobi, I thought he was brought in more so first culture guy, Walter Payton, man of the year. Good fit in this scheme. I thought he was playing out of place a little bit in Pittsburgh's 3-4 defense, moving back to a 4-3 where he played very well early in his career, made a lot of sense. I thought he was kind of brought in to take pressure off of Dwayne Carter. Carter was drafted last year, second day of the draft, comes in, has some, ups and downs, a lot more downs, especially after that wrist injury and active a lot. I think the Bills wanted Carter to earn that backup job behind Ed Oliver and to bring in a veteran, Ogunjobi, 31 years old, to compete with him, mix it up with him early in the year, I thought would be good for him. So now that's kind of out the window. A veteran makes a lot of sense on a short-term deal, someone that you can say it's kind of almost like a handshake deal. You're going to be on our roster the first 6 weeks, and then we'll put you on the practice squad after that. If there's another injury that pops up, we can elevate you again. So that makes a ton of sense. And there's still a glaring need at the one tech. Obviously, they still have Daquan Jones. Jones ups and downs as well. I mean, you can say that for a lot of these defensive linemen. He's getting up there in age, though. He is not the player that they brought in a few years ago. I think they're going to have to draft someone very early at that position. And there's different players. There's the Derek Harmons that, if he's available, fits more the prototypical role of what Sean McDermott's looked for at one tech in the past, 314, 315 range. Not the Kenneth Grant 330s, who I would also be a huge fan of. But in terms of, the stylistic play that they're looking for, they also have to address that. They brought some people in. There's still guys like Benito Jones out there on the market. They want to bring a veteran in to mix it up there as well.
So, Ryan, are you suggesting that the first round pick will go to defensive tackle if who is available, or do you think there's another fit?
I think it should be high on their priority list. Absolutely. It's if it's not defensive tackle, cornerback makes a ton of sense right now. I just don't want the Bills to get into another Kyrie Elam situation where they feel like they have to take that position. And a few years ago, the Chiefs leapfrogged the Bills, take Trent McDuffie, who no doubt in my mind that's who the Bills wanted in that draft class. I wouldn't say they panicked, but Kyrie Elam was the next player that they had they had next up on the list. They say they had a first round grade on him, just didn't fit schematically. In this year's draft, you can definitely get a guy in round 1 and round 2 that I think would be a good fit. When you look
at both positions, at both positions, so interior defensive line as well as cornerback, you think it's that deep in both positions? Or do you
I think corner's a little bit deeper than one tech. Defensive tackle in general is extremely deep. One tech is not as deep as the 3 tech position, in my opinion. So I do feel like if you want to get a premier player or a big name player, you're probably better off going defensive tackle in round 1. You could still get some players, though, on day 2 of the draft that would fit what you're looking for and that have upside.
Okay, well, you've talked a little bit about bringing people in to compete with Dwayne Carter, push Daquan Jones, he's aging, bring in the 3 technique. So what's the plan outside of the draft at the cornerback position? Do you see anybody who's still out there that you're interested in, or what's the play with that outside of the draft?
Yeah, so the player I've suggested has not gone over very well with Bills fans. I think Stephon Gilmore for a 1-year stopgap bringing him back to Buffalo. I thought he was still playing at a high level. He has a relationship with Mike Pellegrino, who the Bills brought over from New England. I know that he's going to be that nickel cornerbacks coach, but he's coached him up in, not coached him up, he was a great player already, but coached him in New England. They have a good relationship. He left Buffalo when the Bills were a completely different team. They were not a contender. He wanted to play in prime time.
He wanted his family to see him on TV. Yes, he
Yes.
wanted his family to see, which will happen in Buffalo.
Exactly. And yeah, he'll get a lot of primetime games in Buffalo. He's at the end of his career. I think it would be kind of cool for him to kind of bring it back where it started on a 1-year deal, a stopgap, because as much as I like Dane Jackson, I think Dane Jackson is a solid first guy off the bench type of player. If there's an injury, break glass in case of emergency. He's not someone that I necessarily want to see out there competing for that cornerback 2 job at training camp against a rookie.
Yeah, talking with Ryan Talbot from the Buffalo Shout podcast at Syracuse.com. So also out there as well, along with Stephon Gilmore, is Tre'Davious White.
Yeah. Beloved by everyone in that locker room, the coaching staff. I do just wonder how much is left in the tank. He has not looked like himself since the second lower body injury. He really did struggle with the Rams. He went over to the Ravens, some moments with the Ravens, but was getting, picked on in some games that I watched where that never would have happened with prime Trey White. They've taken such a toll. Injuries have taken such a toll on him. I just don't know if the cornerback 2 upside is even there at this point.
Wow, that's a strong statement as far as that goes. To me, there's a level of being fully healthy. I can't disagree with anything you said. I think it's more of I got something in the hope tank, right? For Tre'Davious White, if he comes back, would be great to see.
And
him.
even if he doesn't, right? I mean,
Sure.
beloved guy
For sure. But he just loved it here. I'm sure that if it was researched, it would happen more than we think. But to be the 27th pick of the Buffalo Bills in the first round draft, or of the first round, and then wear number 27, like the number he was drafted, there's just a lot of romanticism that I have for Trey as far as that goes. I'd love to see.
Joe, I was the 27th pick, but they wouldn't let me wear 27 on the offensive line. But that would have been cool.
You were too fat to wear 27. Not anymore, though, John.
It would have been 270. You could have got that on the jersey.
That's amazing. When you look around this roster, before we switch over officially for a couple minutes just on the NFL draft and kind of maybe take a quick peek, corners, obviously a concern. It was funny because I didn't misspeak, but the Bills kind of whammied me in the sense of, like, there was about 2.5 weeks ago, their depth chart only had 2 rostered corners. And then all of a sudden, like, they took the depth chart down, and now, like, ESPN.com has a whole bunch of corners on there. Not a whole bunch, but like 4. Outside of corner, defensive line, where are they going to need to shape up still? Because we know that Brandon Beane likes to work late in free agency. Like, he doesn't do everything up front and then stop. He it'll be weeks in, and then it's like, oh, the Bills just made a move.
Right. Well, if you're talking defensive side of the ball, I don't know other than defensive line and corner. I don't think you're going to bring another safety into the mix. They've already done that. They have a good amount of safeties there. Linebacker, I think they're happy with that room. I anticipate they'll draft another linebacker. It feels like they draft a linebacker in those middle rounds, the people that have the strong relative athletic score. There's some candidates, including Sean Dolak of UB, that you could kind of bring in here late in the draft that add another body, add another special teams player, while hoping that some of these young guys can step up in the next year with that opportunity. Ulafosio was brought in last year, played primarily on special teams, but they love the athleticism. Probably from year 1 to year 2, they would like to see him compete for some playing time on defense in a depth role. They love Andreessen. They have some guys there. Dorian Williams really stepped up last year as well. So they're thrilled with their starting combination with Bernard and Milano, but they want some guys to kind of step a point in the wings. And then offensively, I still think there's some depth pieces. They always bring in some veteran O-linemen. They love as many guys as possible competing at camp. And usually you can find one of those veterans that you can sign to your practice squad, like Will Clapp last year. I know he went back and forth between the main roster and the practice squad, but they would probably love another veteran along those lines too.
Do you feel like the move that Matt Milano, so this is 2 hometown deals that Matt Milano has done for the Buffalo Bills. What the first one was his re-signing a couple years back, and then this one. Is Dorian Williams the heir apparent? Is this effectively a, hey, one more year, we're probably going to move on from you? Do you think they'll draft somebody if it's not Dorian Williams? I mean, because it's hard to see Matt Milano, who we all love, here for 2 more years.
Yeah, I think they want Dorian Williams to be the heir apparent, to be that next guy up, and he'll get the opportunity to show that again. They're not going to want Milano playing heavy snaps. They're going to rotate Dorian Williams in at times. And as long as he kind of passes that test, I would think that there's a good chance that with Milano's contract being restructured and the way that he did it, his contract ends this season with the Bills. They probably would let him move on, go elsewhere, and then roll with those guys. If Dorian Williams doesn't step up, they might have to draft someone next year early. Day 2 of the draft where they've taken the Dorian Williams, the Terrell Bernards, and the sort as well, to kind of find that talent as well.
It's funny because there's 3 of us here. There's 3 teams in the AFC East. I feel like we should all put $1 on the line and each of us pick one of the teams that Matt Milano's going to end up on, because that's what's going to happen, right? He's going to be a Jet, a Dolphin, or a Patriot. It's locked in. Probably a Patriot because he went to Boston College, so that's probably where he's going to end up.
That would fit.
Anything else on free agencies, John, for you before we switch over to the draft a little bit?
No, I like your takes on it. I think as I look back on Ulofoshio, Solomon, and Carter, I just I'm not underwhelmed, but I think there was a part of us whenever we see a draft class that we hope there's more contribution. Do you feel like there was a shortage of contribution from last year's draft class?
Yeah, I think there was, and it starts at the top. Keon Coleman, the wrist injury that took him out for a while, a slow start to get going. And once he did, though, he had some really nice moments with the Bills, but he wasn't quite the same post-wrist injury. Cole Bishop, the injury at training camp, really derailed his rookie season. We've talked about Carter. It was just so many, ups and downs. I've used that phrase, it feels like a million times already in this show tonight, but you didn't get that consistent production that I feel like the Bills usually get from 2 or 3 of those rookies in these different rookie classes. So in this upcoming year, you do want to see them take that next step. And for Solomon, there were flashes when given the opportunity. Now, he got to the quarterback a few times in some games late in the season. He just failed to wrap up the QB and to sack him. And that's something he needed to work on. But I was, excited about the flashes that we saw from him. Cole Bishop, I think, has a great opportunity to be one of the 2 starters at safety this year. So there's his opportunity. And for Keon Coleman, if he can go back pre-wrist injury to where he was winning those 50-50 balls and making splash plays, I don't think he's ever going to be that consistent number 1 type of receiver in Buffalo or elsewhere, but he can still be that player that makes 1 or 2 good grabs a game that are difference makers for this team.
I agree with that for sure.
Josh Allen aside, because he is that dude. We go into 2024, jettisoning 5 captains off this team and basically, stripping the roster. And there was an overwhelming sense on all of our shows as content creators that this rookie class from last year is going to have to contribute. They don't contribute, and they're a game away from the Super Bowl, right? I mean, it's hard to imagine. And this is a head coach that some members of Bills Mafia want fired. They only show up when the Bills lose in my DMs, but it's just insane.
Coward.
I don't feel like the Bills can suffer that same thing twice, 2 years in a row. I feel like those guys from last year are going to have to contribute, and they're going to have to hit on some dudes. I know they got 10 picks. They're not making 10 picks. I don't think. Do you think they're making 10 picks?
I would be surprised. I think, one, you're going to package a few to move up in this draft class. I think some of those day 3 picks, they might swap with the team that wants to make a pick this year and take one of their picks in next year's draft. I mean, that's very common as well. If they make 10 selections, I would be pretty shocked.
Yeah. Which begs the question from you that we want to hear, and our listeners want to hear too. We already talked a little bit about it, teased it. So 1st round, 2 second rounds. How do you see that going? And I don't mean as an aggregate. They're going to take a defensive lineman like tackle. They're going to take an edge rusher, and they're going to take a corner. What do you see first, second, and then I've got a surprise question after that. So how do you think it falls for the Bills?
So if you're asking me, so you do mean like in terms of positions, how do I see it shaking
How
out?
how does their board? You said a second ago that
Yeah.
you don't want the Bills to be in a situation where they're taking the player they want versus the best player available. Well,
Right.
that's who the Bills are. Since Tre'Davious White, they lock in on a guy or the position that they have, and then bang, they go get him. My question is more around that: is what do you see as the priority list? Right. So from 1 to 3, they've got 3 picks in the first and second rounds. What's the priority list in your opinion?
D tackle, cornerback, edge.
I think John.
Yeah, I'm the only one I might throw a toss up on is the edge, right? I think there
Would you
might
go
be
edge over corner?
no. I'm saying drop edge for another position.
Oh,
Okay.
well,
I
you
mean,
got to say
I've seen people say
what?
wide
Yeah,
receiver. I've seen
I think
safety.
it just depends on what kind of receiver might be available at that 3 spot. They might be looking for speed, right? And that's one way to build your wide receiver room with free agency, like we have, over the past probably 5 years. But drafting and developing at that position might make some sense insofar as getting a guy into the system, keeping that guy long term in the system, rather than trying to ram the playbook down their throat, as we've been doing recently. Mac Hollins, Amari Cooper, and the list kind of goes on from there.
There's got to be a sense of urgency, right, in this front office, as far as to what we were just talking about, that these guys are going to have to contribute. So my follow-up question is that I said I had for you. Do you see the Bills making 3 picks in 1 and 2, or do you see a potential for them to move up back into round 1 if it is DL corner, DL edge, corner, DL, whatever, if they've got 2 guys there they want?
I think they'd have to pass. And I mean, I know you said they have the 2 second or day 2 picks there in round 2. I don't know what else they'd have to throw in with that to move back into round 1, especially because they own pick 30. It'd be tough for them to have 2 in the first round. Now, could I see them moving up in round 2 and picking someone very early that they see that sitting on the board after day 1, hey, we still have a first round grade on this guy, let's go up and get him? Yeah, that's more plausible in my opinion than 2 first round picks. I think ideally they would love to add though 3 players out of their top 62, because that is how you find difference makers. And you add I just did a mock draft recently, published it today, in fact, where I had them taking Derek Harmon in round 1. He was sitting on the board, upgrades the 1 tech position. Then in round 2, I went safety, believe it or not, because Xavier Watts was available. Notre Dame ball hawk, 13 interceptions in 2 years. Some tackling concerns, which might not fit what McDermott loves, but
Right.
Again, they talked at the end of the year presser about how you need 2 or 3 playmakers on both sides of the ball, and that guy screams playmaker. And then round 3, Landon Jackson out of Arkansas off the edge, who said that he talks to the Bills at least 8 times already during the pre-draft process. So pretty much saying the Bills seem to like me quite a bit, and maybe they'd go up and get someone of that caliber, mix in Epinesa final year of the deal, Bosa on a 1-year deal. So you could prioritize it that way, but I just see so much value in 3 picks that you could potentially get on the field as rookies.
We kind of were under the impression on Sunday, we were just throwing it around, that if Joey Bosa has a good year, which if he stays healthy, that will be, I mean, Joey Bosa is going to have a good year. Right. If he's healthy, he's going to have a good year. We were kind of throwing around just the idea, the concept, Bosa coming from OSU, which I lived in Columbus for 13 years, and I understand that community well, and how they are about their football team, and being in Buffalo and around that atmosphere, that he might want to stay and make it work, if that makes any sense.
No, it makes perfect sense. And he alluded to the fact that it's kind of good to get back to the type of atmosphere that he played at in college, the weather, the elements. It's been different for him, obviously, in Los Angeles with the Chargers, and I'm sure there's a lot of benefits to that in terms of the weather and where you're playing. But he misses that atmosphere, the fan base. The Bills Mafia is a very college-like fan base in terms of how they live and breathe this, and you see that from those college. Some certain college teams and things like that. And I think that'll remind him of it. He's going to love the atmosphere here if he stays healthy. Brandon Bean also would probably love to have him back, because that when he's been healthy, he has produced from the sack perspective, from the pressure perspective, and he'd be a great mentor for some of these young players. A rookie, if they draft one, of Javon Solomon, who's entering year 2, and the list goes on.
Yeah. I was telling John and Jerry on Sunday night on the show that being in Columbus for 13 years, Buckeye fans, the OSU Michigan game is bigger than the Super Bowl to them.
Right.
That's how it is. And then when you look at, I remember when I first moved there, I had a buddy of mine. I'd lived there a couple of years, and I was like, "Hey, man, what do you do?" I don't remember where we were. It was like, "Hey, you want to go get a drink or something like that?" He goes like, "No, got to get home. The Buckeye game, or the Buckeyes are on." And I'm like, "It's Tuesday." He goes, "Yeah, it's the women's softball game." And I was like, okay.
That's next level.
We live in a different world, you and I, and that's how a lot of them are. They're just, it's insane. Let's go ahead and work on getting all of us out of here a little bit early this evening. Ryan, why don't you tell everybody where they can find your content and hear more about you and listen to you and your buddy Matt, and then we'll ask you one more question, and then we'll move on with our week.
Yeah, sounds good. You can find me on the social media platforms at Ryan Talbot Bills. You can find my work at Syracuse.com and NYUp.com, and you can find the Shout Buffalo Football Podcast and all your favorite podcast platforms.
Yeah, and you guys are crushing it over there. Before I ask my final question, John, do you have another question for Ryan at all?
I have so many questions, but I definitely want to get Ryan back to his Olean beers. So I will defer to you, Joe.
So this is a little not off topic. It's still Buffalo Bills related, but we had the opportunity to be in London. Obviously, you were covering the team with Matt, and we saw each other just off the street, or on the street that the Palace is on there. I don't remember what the church was, and it was you, Matt, and what Jason Scott Bills, right? Is his handle on Twitter? Yeah. Who's become a pretty good friend of mine, which is fun. All that to say this, my wife and I went to Ireland, London, and Paris, and loved Ireland. Tremendous, like by far and away, blew away the other two cities, which people are probably like, what? Blew away Paris? Yes, blew away Paris. The Bills have the opportunity to play in Germany, London again, and potentially Ireland. And I guess the question I have is what would your preference be? Because I feel like they're going to get picked. And is there a shot they could go back or go to Ireland?
Yeah, I think that of the possibilities, that one's highest on my list in terms of what I would love to cover, and then the likeliest of the 4, or of the 3 different spots. So there's 4 games that they could potentially travel internationally for. And when you look at Buffalo's schedule, their furthest road game this season is Houston. That is not a far road schedule. So if the NFL is sitting there saying, well, it's not going to be a home game for the Bills, first of all, they've already announced all the home teams. It'll be a road game for them, and they're not really traveling far this season. You have Josh Allen, the reigning MVP. Let's show him off to the world. It would make a lot of sense. And Dublin, that'd be the Pittsburgh game. So,
yep.
That
it's about a 5-hour flight. It's about a 5-hour flight for both teams.
Not for me.
And I think that would be my favorite, my preference. They could technically do Madrid against Miami.
Oh, wow.
They don't do a ton of divisional games, but they've done some in the past in these different cities. So that's a possibility. The Jets is a possibility. So another division game. And then the Browns, that is one of the London games. So the opportunities there, it wouldn't shock me if the schedule makers look at Buffalo's schedule and they say, for those reasons, they don't have to travel very far this year on their road schedule. Let's make them go one game out of their way. We'll give them the bye week after. I think the Bills will learn their lesson to travel earlier in the week to where they're playing if this pans out. And honestly, we'll probably start hearing about those international games shortly after the draft when it's all said and done, because they like to announce those. And then usually it's mid-May that we hear the overall schedule.
Yeah,
well, my interjection point is, having been to Spain, I think I trust the Irish to grow grass a little bit better.
There we go.
That's funny. Well, Ryan, thank you so much for spending a little bit of time with us here on this off-season Tuesday. It's always good to have you. It's always good to chat you up. But I'm going to go ahead and get us out of here, if that's all right with you fellas. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning into On the Beat on the Overreaction Buffalo Sports Network, powered by the Believe podcast network. My name is Joe Miller. That's John Fina. Jerry Ostrowski is off doing something fun, I'm sure, with his family. But for me, for John, for Jerry, for Ryan, who we appreciate being with us, we'll talk to you guys some other time. Go Bills.
Go Bills.
Go Bills.